It's great to have you with us. Over the next 60 minutes, we'll take a look at the top stories and tell you how they impact the business bottom line. In focus tonight, the elusive Marcus Jooste finally answers for what's been called the biggest accounting scandal in South African history. But guess what? The former Steinhoff CEO says it wasn't me. While Marcus Jooste had jaws dropping in Parliament while he claimed his innocence, the rand continued to drop against major currencies today. The recession, no doubt, mainly to blame. And we'll end with another unbelievable story, but this didn't happen in Parliament. It's in Cuba, where condoms are being used to fish, fix punctures, and, believe it or not, ferment wine. But first, other news headlines. The Gauteng government is vacating all its buildings in Johannesburg. 3 firefighters have died while fighting a blaze at a building used by several provincial departments. Earlier, it was reported that the building was not compliant with safety regulations. We'll have more on that story in a moment. Meanwhile, the owners of a factory that went up in flames in Kaya Sands, north of Johannesburg, are reassuring workers they still have jobs. The cause of the fire is not yet known. There have been no injuries or fatalities. And ANC members in the Eastern Cape have stopped Provincial DA leader Ngaba Banga and former Nelson Mandela Bay Mayor Athol Trollip from addressing the New Brighton community. The party is visiting communities in the metro. It says it wants to explain what happened at the council meeting where Trollip was ousted. ANC members in the area say Trollip is not welcome as he's no longer the mayor. We'll get to our top business story in a moment, but first this. Gauteng Premier David Makhura says he's regularly updated about where the buildings in the province are fit for use. He was in downtown Johannesburg after a fire ripped through a department building. Makhura says they were in the process of moving government employees out of that building.
The doctors have assured us that all the patients are in a stable condition. All the patients that we were able to see is 5 of them. 4 of them are firefighters, and 1 of them is a cleaner who worked in the Department of Health. So we spoke to all of them, and the doctors assured us that they are in a stable condition. They will also be attended to tomorrow about follow-up treatment from the doctors.
I mean, you were able to actually see them right now, and we understand that 2 of them are going to theater tomorrow.
Yes.
But as far as you can see, what injuries have they sustained, the firefighters who are in intensive care?
Well, let me start by saying that firstly, we convey our condolences to the families of the 3 firefighters who lost their lives. We deeply convey the loss because those are very dedicated public servants. They do dangerous work. They are brave. They faced the fire that was very hard to put down. That's why even now the firefighters are still busy with that fire. I want to say that I think those that are here in hospital have suffered some burns. 2 of them is, in fact 3 of them, it's on their hands, but they also inhaled smoke, so they also have shock out of that. That's what they are being treated for, and the doctors assured us that it is something that is within control. We wish them well. We hope they will recover pretty soon.
Now, MMC for Public Safety in the city of Johannesburg, Michael Sun, says senior officials are visiting families.
Luckily, the 4 firefighters taken to the Garden City Hospital, they have been released, Mr. Premier. The other 2, unfortunately, are still in ICU at the Moore Park Hospital, where the Premier and ourselves will be visiting very soon. Is another precautionary measure. We will be closing off Albertina Sisulu and Pixie Semes Street tomorrow. As you can see, the building has just been put out in terms of fire. However, the glass panels and the debris are still falling. We want to ensure that we close off this block to ensure that no pedestrians or motorists will come near the building.
All right, our top business story now. He was the CEO of Steinhoff, the big boss, the man in charge of leading the company, the highest ranking person. You get my point? Okay, so despite all that, Marcus Jooste says he's not to blame for the company's fall from grace. The evasive man finally appeared before Parliament. It, of course, wanted to know who's to blame for putting government workers' pensions at risk. But Jooste insists he was not behind the collapse of Steinhoff, even though he was CEO. Tough questions were asked and sarcastic statements made, with the Finance Committee chair saying Jooste was painting himself as the Mother Teresa. Lester Kivett has the details.
It's a meeting 8 months in the making. Finally, former Steinhoff CEO Marcus Jooste appears before a joint parliamentary committee. He's here because more than 1 million government employees' pensions is invested in his former company. When Steinhoff nearly collapsed because of fraud allegations and false inflating of profits, the pensions almost became worthless.
In terms of the biggest corporate scandal, the biggest corporate failure in South Africa, yes. The word scandal is now the writers of sensation, and of course it is saddened about the people that have lost money.
Jooste says mistakes were made. Bad business decisions coupled with business units spread across the world leading to uncoordinated auditing procedures meant the company couldn't post financial results in time.
I feel totally responsible for what happened at Steinhoff, but for the reasons that I've mentioned why it happened. I chose the wrong partner. We went into territories when we shouldn't have gone into territories. But the discussion up to now and the allegations were fostered around accounting issues.
MPs are now calling on state bodies to intensify probes into the Steinhoff saga.
What we're simply saying is Parliament can do so much. But really, ultimately, it's the regulators and the Hawks and the NPA that must simply do their jobs.
The Hawks is expected to update Parliament on the Steinhoff investigations in 2 weeks. Lester Kivett, Parliament.
Well, Marcus Jooste was grilled in Parliament, as you saw, but that's cold comfort for the company's shareholders who lost millions. It all begs the question, does our law protect investors? Here's Michael Murillia with a quick look at the data.
I want to take a look at the Doing Business survey for 2018. This is a report which is issued by the World Bank, and basically it ranks countries in terms of the ease of doing business, the kinds of protections that are offered to them, the kinds of regulations that are in place in terms of setting up a business, for example. At the top of the pile is New Zealand on 86.5. And what we're going to show you here are essentially the top 6 countries and just give you some reference, some base measurement, and then compare South Africa very quickly. So New Zealand, Singapore, Denmark, South Korea, and Hong Kong making up the top 5. The USA finishes 6th, interestingly enough, with a score of just under 83. And South Africa averaging around about 65. That places us 82nd in the world. The survey featured 190 countries, so ranked 82nd in the world for this year. Let's very quickly take a look at that measurement, which we've got right there, investor protection. We mentioned it a little bit earlier. We actually do quite well in this respect. We're ranked 24th in the world when it comes to investor protection. In other words, the rights that you have as an investor, as a shareholder, and the World Bank also giving us scores on certain key indicators. So disclosure, what does a corporation actually tell its shareholders What is it forced to tell them in its financial results and so on? A score of 8 out of 10 for that one. Director liability, so the board of directors, can they be held accountable for what they do? Again, a score of 8 out of 10. Shareholder rights. If we have a share in a company, we do have certain rights. We are empowered to a certain extent. But this one, possibly an area of concern. Corporate transparency, South Africa scoring just 4 out of 10. Compare that to New Zealand, for instance, and that country got a score of 7 out of 10. So perhaps something to look at as Parliament holds these hearings and tries to chart a way forward for South Africa dealing with corporates.
Well, former head of Steinhoff, of course, is blaming everybody but himself. But will investors believe his story? Let's find out from trader and founder of Herenya Capital Advisors, Petri Redlinghuys, who joins us from our Cape Town studio. Thanks for your time. Appreciate it. Now, as you watch the markets today, how did the share react today to what was said, and how did investors react as well? Are they showing confidence in the testimony or not?
Well, the share price reacted positively. I mean, the share price ended up around 5.7% higher on the day at around R2.77. So, I mean, it's still a far cry from the R66.25 it was about a year ago. So, I wouldn't say that it's recovering that much, but it is necessary. You know, from the low base, it's a strong reaction, over 5% up on the day, with relatively higher than usual volume traded, considering where the share price is and how it's been trading over the last couple of weeks and or months, if you want to include that. But whether or not this boosts confidence in the company, I don't quite know. I think that basically Jooste had said a lot of things that we've already heard. No surprises, he doesn't take any accountability. He's not brought any new information to the table. He's managed to pin a lot of the blame on a deal or a partner that they brought into the business in 2007, and then did some transactions with the purchase of Conforama, as well as the purchase of some other furniture businesses in 2011, in which he couldn't, the new partner couldn't bring his half of the funding to the table. And then there was a fallout in 2014, and the whole thing their partnership came to an end, their joint venture came to an end, and he's essentially placing the blame at the feet of this series of events and not taking accountability for anything that happened, as I suppose one would expect. And of course, just shed some light on basically what had led to the delay of the results and so on, which I suppose clarifies the picture a little bit, but it doesn't necessarily make me feel any more comfortable. I think for now, the market is really just waiting and looking for the historic results that are, part of the forensic sort of auditing process that's happening, that we are expecting the historic results to be released to us at the end of December or late December. And I think that is really when we will find out whether or not this company really stands a chance of surviving, because we don't quite know how deep the hole is, and we don't know what happened. And so far we've heard 3 different testimonies from 3 different people within Steinhoff themselves. We've seen Jooste and we've seen Lachransi both make their statements in Parliament, or do their testimonies in Parliament, and all 3 have different stories. So we don't yet actually know what happened, and I think we only find that out later on in the year when the historic financials are re-audited and brought to light at the end of December.
Yeah, now Marcus Jooste, as you mentioned several things that might have snowballed and led to the share price dropping by 95%. So are those things really what could have led to the collapse of Steinhoff shares, or are they a small part of it? Because he wants us to believe that ultimately led to it and it was nothing irregular.
Well, okay, so whether or not there's irregularities in the sequence of events that led to the collapse, I suppose that is up to the investigators. I know the Hawks is looking at it as well, so it's up to them to decide whether or not everything was above board. But I can say that the market is a very fickle, I don't want to use the word mistress, but the market is a very fickle creature. is driven by sentiment, you know. So remembering the sort of trading days leading up to the collapse, if you want to put it that way, we saw Monday the share traded down 9%, Tuesday the share traded down 9%, and Wednesday the results are due. So there's a feeling that, well, the results can't be that bad that the share falls 18% in 2 days leading into it, or somebody knows something and is unloading a lot of stock before the results come out, the results are going to be bad. Then the day that the results are expected, you get a statement saying, oh, listen, no results, we can't get our auditors to sign them off, which is obviously bad news. Oh, and by the way, our CEO is stepping down immediately, as well as not just from our board, but every other board that he's on every listed company on the JSE. That is terrible news. So the reaction from the market from that point forward is a very emotional one. We've seen very recently, for example, with MTN, the way that the stock has traded. I mean, down today, it bounced today, yesterday down significantly, a few days ago down 22%, and this on the back of the Nigerian news. What's interesting, though, to note is that in the few days that MTN has fallen so hard, the short interest in that stock has risen, has skyrocketed. In other words, people placing trades to benefit from the price going lower have increased almost exponentially. So this is almost an indicator of the sentiment behind what drives price in the market. So essentially, a lot of the time, companies' market values aren't necessarily determined by what the company is worth, but what people believe about what the company is worth.
So very quickly, Petri, because I've run out of time, I need to ask you about this. Let's talk about Steinhoff without Jooste. The company was fined for not disclosing price-sensitive information to investors in time. It still doesn't seem like the company is moving in the right direction. So can investors trust anything coming out of Steinhoff even now after Marcus Jooste?
So my view, and I mean, I could be wrong, but my view is that I see a company that's scrambling to protect itself and not say anything wrong. I think that only once we have the historic, forensic audited financial statements that are, looking back 3 to 5 years, that we are getting at the end of December or expected to get at the end of December. From that point forward, I think we can believe those statements. Until then, I think that, everything else is a PR job at this point.
All right, thank you so much for the insight. We do appreciate it. That was trader and founder of Herenya Capital Advisors, Petri Redlinghuys. Well, the one thing many people took from Marcus Jooste's statements in Parliament was him basically saying, it wasn't me. In fact, we've been saying it for weeks now because it reminds us of that very popular song. So why not end the Steinhoff segment like this?
I want to place on record that when I left Steinhoff on the 4th of December, I was not aware of any accounting irregularity, what they refer to in the books of Steinhoff. Wasn't me. The demise in the value, I have tried to explain to the committee members that when a company in the public domain loses the support and the faith of the investors, then that happens. And with not releasing the financial results as a result of the sequence of events, is my view why the share price collapsed on that day. It wasn't me. The audit team of a listed public company is the function of the audit committee, not of the CEO.
Hold on a second. All right. Coming up on NewsHour.
If we were going to go into an election with an economy in recession.
The ANC is in concern mode, admitting it has to do a lot of things to revive the economy ahead of next year's elections. Stay with us.